Darius Wynn was 42 years old, and for 12 years he had been the kind of husband who asked no questions, trusted completely, and built a life with his own hands, a paid-off home, no debt, a marriage he believed in. What he didn't know was that his wife Camille had spent 19 months planning her exit, draining their joint account in small, careful increments, and meeting privately with a divorce attorney, all while her lover coached her on exactly how to take everything Darius had built. That lover's name was Preston Falk. And Preston had decided that the fastest way to remove Darius from the equation was to show up at his front door on a Friday night with 3 large men, a fraudulent deed transferring the house to Camille, and 6 words, "You're going to sign this." Preston Falk had targeted quiet men before. He knew how they folded. What Preston did not know, what none of them knew, was what Darius had spent 12 years doing before he ever met Camille. And he was about to find out. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The coffee was still hot. Darius Wynn sat with the mug cradled in both hands, elbows on his knees, watching the dark breathe. 4:47 in the morning. The neighborhood was completely still. No cars, no voices, no dogs. Just the faint sound of wind moving through the oak trees that lined the back fence, and the distant hum of the city existing somewhere beyond all of it. He liked this hour. Always had. In the Navy, the hours before dawn had belonged to the mission, to the brief, to the final equipment check, and the last quiet moment before everything became noise and speed and consequence. He had learned to love those minutes, not because they were peaceful, but because they were honest. The world hadn't started performing yet. Nothing was pretending to be anything it wasn't. He still used the hour the same way, to think, to check, to be still in a way the rest of the day rarely allowed. His back porch faced east, and in a few hours the sun would clear the tree line and paint the yard in long golden panels. He had planned the deck furniture specifically for that. 2 chairs angled just right, a small table between them, sized for 2 mugs. He had built the rhythm of his mornings around the light, the same way he had built everything else in his life, intentionally, without waste, without needing anyone to notice. He set the mug on the armrest and reached for his phone, pulled up the camera application out of habit, and scrolled through the overnight footage the way another man might scan a news feed. 3 cameras total: front porch, driveway, side yard along the gate. He had installed them 3 years ago, after a string of car break-ins 2 streets over. They had nothing to do with distrust. They were simply good information management. He watched the timestamps roll by. A raccoon at 2:11. A neighbor's cat along the fence at 3:40. Nothing else. Camille's car had been in the driveway all night. He noted that, filed it. He took another sip of coffee and let his eyes settle on the yard, the clean edges of the grass, the garden bed along the back fence that Camille had planted with marigolds 3 summers ago and still kept up every spring. He had built the raised beds for her one October weekend, measured twice, cut once, sealed the wood himself. She had seemed genuinely happy with them. He believed she had been. 12 years was a long time. He had met her at 29, just back from a deployment he didn't talk about. One that had started with 6 men and ended with 4, and those 2 missing people had left holes in him that didn't show on the outside, but took up permanent residence somewhere deep. He had come home quieter than he left, slower to speak, quicker to observe. Camille had been warmth, pure and easy warmth, the kind of person who laughed before the punchline and remembered everyone's birthday without writing it down. She had looked at him like he was worth looking at, and after what he had come back carrying, that had meant more than he ever told her. He had decided, in the deliberate way he decided everything, that she was worth building a life around. So he built it. He paid off the house in 11 years instead of 30. He structured their finances carefully, kept no debt, spent modestly, and saved consistently. Not because he was afraid of living, but because he had seen enough of the world to understand that freedom was the real currency. And freedom came from owing nothing to anyone. He had built a quiet life. A good one. He had believed they were in it together. But something had shifted. He couldn't point to a single moment. It was smaller than that. A collection of details that he noticed the way he noticed everything, without announcement. Camille coming home on a Tuesday, 40 minutes later than usual, with a story that was slightly too casual, slightly too smooth. A receipt in the kitchen for a restaurant he didn't recognize, for 2 people, on a night he had been home alone. A new perfume she had started wearing that she hadn't mentioned buying. A particular way she looked at her phone now, screen angled just slightly. The way people angled things they didn't want seen. He had not confronted her. That was not how he operated. When you moved too early, you got a lie. When you waited and watched and gathered the full picture, you got the truth. He had learned that lesson in places that did not forgive mistakes, and he had never forgotten it. He was watching. The back door opened, and she stepped out in her robe, pale blue, the one with the frayed left cuff she refused to replace because she said it was still good. Her hair was loose. Her smile was warm. She looked the way she had always looked in the mornings, soft and real and entirely at home in this life. "You're up early," she said. "You want eggs?" He looked at her. He smiled, full and easy, the smile she expected, the smile she had always gotten. "Yeah, baby," he said. "That sounds good." She went back inside. He turned back to the yard. His eyes were steady, quiet, already moving through the calculations she couldn't see and didn't know he had started. Roy's kitchen smelled like coffee and old wood, and the particular kind of quiet that settles into a house after decades of people living honestly inside it. The table was small, 4 chairs, oak, the kind of furniture built to last rather than to impress. A dish towel hung over the oven handle. A photograph of Roy and Marion on their wedding day sat in a frame on the windowsill above the sink, slightly tilted, the way things tilt in houses where no one is performing for guests. Darius sat across from his uncle with both hands wrapped around a mug and said nothing. Roy said nothing either. That was the thing about Roy. He had spent 30 years as a detective in a city that gave him every reason to talk too much, and instead he had learned that silence was the most useful tool in any room. He set his phone face up on the table between them and slid it forward without ceremony, without preamble, without a single word of introduction. Then he folded his hands and waited. Darius looked down at the phone. The photograph was clear. Good resolution. Roy had always been precise, even with the small things. The restaurant was upscale, candlelit, the kind of place with white tablecloths and wine glasses with long stems. Uptown Charlotte. The kind of establishment Darius had taken Camille to for their anniversary, because she liked the atmosphere, and he liked watching her enjoy it. In the photograph, Camille was leaning across the table. She was kissing a man in a blue blazer. Not a brush. Not ambiguous. She was leaning all the way across with purpose, one hand on the table for balance, and the man, tall, broad-shouldered, a certain kind of deliberate ease in how he occupied the chair, had his hand at her jaw. Darius looked at the photograph for a long time. He did not look away from it quickly, the way a man looks away from something that burns him. He looked at it, the way he had learned to look at everything difficult, steadily, completely, until he had absorbed every detail, and the detail had nowhere left to hide. The candle on the table between them, the wine, the way her shoulders were, the way she was not looking around to see who might be watching. She was not nervous. She was comfortable. She had been doing this for a while. Roy let the silence run as long as it needed to. Finally, Darius straightened up. He didn't say anything for another moment. Then he reached out and turned the phone face down on the table, gently, the way you set something down that you've finished reading. "You were there for your anniversary," Darius said. It was not a question. "Marion's favorite place," Roy said. "We go every year." "You took it the same night." "Minute I saw her." Roy's voice was even. No apology in it, because there was nothing to apologize for. "Called you when we got to the car." Darius nodded slowly. He remembered the call. He had been sitting on the back porch, the same chair, the same dark, and he had looked at Roy's name on the screen and answered on the second ring. Roy had said, "I need to see you this week. It's about Camille. Nothing more." And Darius had said, "I'll come Thursday." And they had hung up, and he had sat there for a while before going inside. He had already known, in the way you know things before you know them. "I'll help however you need," Roy said. "Whatever that looks like. You tell me." Darius looked at his uncle, at the 68 years of wear and loyalty and hard-won clarity in that face, and felt something move through him that he did not give permission to land. "You need anything from me right now?" Roy asked. Darius picked up his mug. "You got more coffee?" Roy studied him for just a moment. Then he got up without another word and brought the pot to the table. The drive home took 22 minutes. Darius drove the speed limit the whole way. He kept the radio off. He watched the road and the traffic, and the lights cycling green to yellow to red. And he breathed steadily, and he did not allow himself to arrive somewhere he wasn't ready to be yet. Camille was in the kitchen when he got home. She was at the counter with her back half-turned, laughing at something on her phone. A short, bright sound that bounced off the tile. The kind of laugh that required absolutely no awareness of anything around her. The kitchen smelled like the garlic bread she'd made with dinner. A plate was set aside for him, covered with a paper towel, on the counter by the stove. He stood in the doorway for exactly 2 seconds. Then he walked in and kissed her on the side of the head and said he was going to eat and then turn in early. She said, "Okay, babe," without looking up. He took the plate to the table and ate alone and quietly. And when he was done, he washed his dish and said goodnight. She was still on her phone. He lay in the dark beside her and stared at the ceiling. She was asleep within 20 minutes. Her breathing was slow and even, completely unbothered, completely at rest. The ceiling fan turned overhead. The room was cool and quiet. Darius did not sleep. He ran through what he knew. He ran through what he didn't know yet. He ran through what he would need, and how long it would take, and what order the pieces needed to come together in. He was patient. He had spent 9 days in a hide site in Yemen once, eating cold rations and breathing through his nose, and waiting for a 30-second window that only came on day 8. He could wait. He was very, very good at waiting. He was up before 4. Camille wouldn't stir until 7, maybe 7:30 on a Saturday. He had time. He made coffee, set the mug on the kitchen table, and pulled the filing drawer open beneath the built-in desk in the corner, the one Camille used for coupons and take-out menus and things she meant to deal with later. The bank statements were in the back. 12 months of them. Paper copies he had always requested, even after everything went digital, because that was the kind of man he was. He set them on the table in order, oldest to newest, and sat down. He put on his reading glasses. He began. He had always auto-paid the household account, set it up years ago and let it run. Utilities, insurance, groceries, the occasional home repair. He reviewed the annual summary every January for tax purposes, and that was usually enough. There had never been a reason to look closer. There was a reason now. He went line by line. Every charge, every merchant, every date. He had a yellow legal pad beside him, and he wrote things down in 2 columns, known and unknown. The known column filled fast. Grocery stores, the utility company, the gas station she always used, the pharmacy, the streaming service. Normal. Expected. The unknown column was slower, but it filled. A hotel in Asheville. $189. A Tuesday night in March. He remembered March. She had told him she was visiting a college friend. He had not thought about it again. He wrote it down. A restaurant in Greensboro. $94. A Friday in May. She had worked late that Friday. He had eaten leftovers and watched the game. He wrote it down. A boutique jewelry store in South Park. $217. The Saturday before his birthday. She had given him a watch for his birthday. A nice one. He had thanked her. He had worn it to dinner. He wrote it down. Another hotel. Greensboro again. $204. A weekend in June when she had said the girls were doing a spa trip. He wrote it down. He kept going. It took him 2 hours to get through everything. The coffee went cold, and he did not get up to warm it. By the time he reached the most recent statement, the unknown column covered most of the legal pad. 43 separate charges across 11 months. None of them large enough to catch his eye in isolation. None of them exceeding $230. Some as small as $34. A lunch, probably. Somewhere she had paid cash, but used the card for drinks. 43 charges. Combined. Just under $4,000. $4,000 he had worked for, paid into their shared account, and watched leave without ever once being told where it went. He set his pen down. He took off his reading glasses and set them on the table. He sat for a moment and looked at the two columns side by side. Then he put his glasses back on and kept working. He called Roy at 9. Roy picked up on the second ring, the way men who have spent their lives in law enforcement always answer, alert, no matter the hour. The man in the photograph, Darius said. I need a name, whatever your contacts can pull. Already asked around, Roy said. After I called you. Of course he had. Preston Falk, Roy said. 44. Real estate broker, mid-level, offices over in Ballantyne. Drives a Range Rover, leased. Has a habit of getting involved with married women. Darius was quiet. Not the first time he's done something like this, Roy continued. There's a situation in Greensboro about 3 years back. Husband found out. There was some kind of pressure applied, and the husband backed down. Took a payout and signed whatever needed signing. A pause. Same story in Raleigh 2 years ago. Different woman, different husband. That one settled quieter. Darius wrote Preston Falk at the top of a clean page on the legal pad. He underlined it once. He walked away clean both times, Roy said. He did, Darius said. Neither of them said anything for a moment. I appreciate you, Roy. I know it, Roy said, and hung up. Felicia Okafor picked up on the third ring. He had been her client for 6 years. Since before the house was paid off, when he'd wanted clean documentation on every financial decision he made. She knew his complete picture. She knew it better than most people knew their own. He told her everything in 12 minutes, standing at the kitchen window, watching the backyard in the early morning light. She asked 3 clarifying questions. She did not express surprise. She did not offer sympathy or perform alarm. When he finished, she said, The house is the primary marital asset. It'll be subject to equitable distribution under state law. Your retirement accounts as well, prorated for the marriage period. A brief pause. I'm going to need copies of everything you just described. I'll have them to you Monday. I'll prepare for a divorce filing and begin reviewing discovery options, she said. Don't do anything with the household account yet. I won't. And Darius, her voice was level. Don't tell her you know. I know, he said. He ended the call. He went back to the table. He stacked the statements in order, oldest to newest, and paper clipped them together. He did the same with the legal pad pages. He placed everything inside a manila folder from the desk drawer. He found a pen and wrote on the tab in clean block letters, "Household Statements." He filed it in the back of the drawer, behind the takeout menus. He was not done gathering. The call came on a Wednesday. Darius was at his desk at the defense contracting firm, 2 floors up in a glass building off I-485, reviewing a logistics report for a procurement review the following week. The work was methodical. He was good at methodical. His personal cell buzzed against the desk. Unknown number. He picked it up. "Yeah. You Darius Wynn?" Not a question. The voice was smooth, practiced. The kind of voice that had been used to getting its way for so long it had stopped thinking about whether it deserved to. "I am," Darius said. "Time we talked, man to man." A brief pause, theatrical, like the man on the other end had rehearsed the pause specifically. "Be at your house Friday night. I'm bringing some people. We need to discuss your wife." Darius leaned back in his chair. He looked at the logistics report on his desk. A ceiling fan turned slowly in the office across the hall. "Come on by," he said. A beat of silence from the other end. Then the line went dead. Darius set his phone on the desk and looked at it for a moment. 22 seconds. Start to finish. He picked up the phone again and called Felicia. She answered on the second ring. "Preston Falk just called my personal cell," he said. "Told me to be at the house Friday night. Said he's bringing people. His words were that he wants to discuss my wife. Time of the call? 2:14. Save it. Don't delete anything from that number." He could hear her writing. "I want you to document the call in your own words before end of day. Date, time, exact language used. Your response. Already planning on it. What's your read on Friday?" "I think he's bringing the deed," Darius said. A brief pause. "I think so too." Another pause, shorter. "What do you need from me before then?" "Nothing yet. After Friday, everything." "I'll be available," she said. "All weekend if necessary." He ended the call. He sat for a moment. Then he scrolled to Trey's number. Trey picked up on the first ring. "I need you at the house Friday," Darius said. "Early evening. Side yard, out of sight. Stay there until I call you off or things move." "What time?" 7. Maybe earlier." "All right." No hesitation. No questions he didn't need answered. That was Trey. 8 years out of the teams and still built exactly the same way. "Anyone I know?" "No. 4 of them, probably. One's large. Planning to use it." "Understood," Trey said. That was the whole conversation. Thursday morning, before Camille was up, Darius went outside with a small stepladder and his tool bag. The 3 property cameras had been in place for 2 years. Front porch, driveway, and the corner of the garage facing the side yard. Good cameras, high definition. He had installed them himself after a rash of package thefts in the neighborhood and kept them running out of habit ever since. He repositioned all 3. The porch camera he angled down and slightly right, giving it a clean view of the front door, the top porch step, and the full width of the landing. Anyone standing at that door would be captured face on, full frame. He checked the field of view on his phone, adjusted 2 degrees, checked again. The driveway camera he moved to the eave above the garage door, angling it to take in the full driveway approach from the street. Every vehicle, every person on foot, every plate. The side yard camera was the most important adjustment. He remounted it higher on the fence post, tilting it to cover the gap between the house and the shrub line where Trey would be positioned. He did not want Trey's presence in frame. He did not want any ambiguity about what the footage showed. When he was done, he pulled up all 3 feeds on his phone and walked the full front approach himself, from the street, up the driveway, to the porch, watching his own image move through each frame in sequence. Clean, complete, no dead angles. He went back inside. That afternoon he called a number he had not dialed in over a year. Marcus Webb, former NCIS. Good man. Sharp. Hypothetical, Darius said, after they had exchanged the brief pleasantries of men who do not call each other often but trust each other completely. Someone arrives at a private residence and presents a property transfer document, a deed, under the implied or direct threat of physical harm. The property owner is compelled to sign. What does North Carolina treat that as? Marcus didn't need long to think about it. Criminal extortion, he said. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Felony assault if there's any physical contact. Every person present who facilitated it carries exposure. Doesn't matter who drafted the document. Even if no one technically touches the homeowner? Physical duress doesn't require contact, Marcus said. Presence, numbers, and the implicit threat is enough. Prosecutors charge it as coercion. A pause. You need this for something? Just wanted to be clear on the law, Darius said. He already knew the answer. He had known it before he dialed. He wanted it documented that he had asked someone else. Friday came the way Fridays always came, quietly. The week releasing its grip by degrees. Camille left at 4:30, dressed nicely, telling him she was spending the evening at her mother's. She kissed him on the cheek. He said to tell Bernadette he said hello. He watched her car back out of the driveway from the kitchen window. Then he ate dinner. A simple plate. Rice, chicken. The green beans he'd made the night before. He ate at the kitchen table. No television, no music. He rinsed the plate and put it in the drying rack. He pulled up the camera feeds on his phone. All three live. All three clear. The porch empty. The driveway quiet. The side yard still. He set his phone on the coffee table and sat down on the couch. The house was quiet around him. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into the early dark. A dog barking somewhere up the block. The distant sound of a lawnmower finishing its last pass. The kind of sounds a neighborhood makes when it doesn't know anything is coming. He folded his hands in his lap. He waited. The Range Rover's headlights swept across the living room ceiling at 8:47 p.m. Darius heard the engine before he saw the lights. A heavy vehicle, moving slow and deliberate up the block. He recognized the particular idle of it, the way it settled when it stopped. He had spent 12 years learning to identify things by sound before he could see them. He stood up from the couch, set his glass of water on the coffee table, straightened his shirt. He walked to the front door and opened it before anyone knocked. Preston Falk was already coming up the porch steps. All 6 feet 3 inches of him, dressed in dark slacks and a black button-down with the collar open, moving with the comfortable authority of a man who had done this before and expected the same result. 3 men followed him up the path, large, unhurried, spreading out slightly the way men do when they want to be counted. The one on the left was pulling on leather gloves as he walked. Not work gloves, the fitted kind. The one on the right had something in his jacket pocket that pulled the fabric down and forward. He was not trying to hide it. The 4th man hung back near the driveway, watching the street. Darius stood in the open doorway and said nothing. Preston stopped at the top of the steps. He looked at Darius, the way men like him always looked at men like Darius, sizing up the quiet, finding it small, feeling confirmed. He reached inside his blazer and produced a folded document. He held it out. "You're going to sign this." Darius looked at the document. A quitclaim deed. He could see the header clearly from where he stood. The property address printed in neat type. A signature line waiting at the bottom. Someone had prepared it carefully. Someone who understood property law well enough to know which form to use and not well enough to know it didn't matter. He looked at Preston. He did not take the deed. The man with the leather gloves moved first. He came from the left, fast for his size, arm already pulling back. He had done this before, too. The difference was that everything he knew about how that motion ended was wrong. Darius stepped inside the swing, not away from it, into it, and the fist passed his ear close enough to feel the air. What happened next lasted 11 seconds by any honest count. The man with the gloves went down first, folded at the midsection and then at the knees. The man with the weighted pocket had time to reach for it and no time to use it. The third man, who had not yet committed to a direction, made the mistake of committing to one. Darius moved through all three of them the way water moves through a space, finding every opening, filling it, leaving nothing standing. He had not raised his voice. He was not breathing hard. He straightened his shirt again. Preston had not moved. He was still holding the deed, arm partially extended, frozen in the posture of a man whose plan had just stopped making sense. His eyes moved across the three men on the ground, one against the porch railing, one on his side on the steps, one sitting against the front of the house with both hands on his face, and came back to Darius. Trey stepped out of the side yard. He didn't say anything. He positioned himself between Preston and the driveway with the calm efficiency of a man taking a seat he had already reserved, and he stood there looking at Preston with an expression that contained no particular emotion. Preston looked at Trey, then back at Darius. Darius reached out and took the deed from Preston's hand. He did it gently, the way you take something from someone who should not be holding it. He looked at it once, folded it along its original crease, and stepped inside. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. "I need to report an assault and an attempted coerced property transfer," he said when the dispatcher answered. His voice was level, clear, the voice of a man giving a briefing. "4 men arrived at my residence and attempted to compel me under physical threat to sign a fraudulent deed. 3 of them initiated physical contact. All 4 are still on the premises. The incident was captured on 3 property cameras, high definition, audio-enabled." He gave the address. He described all 4 men. He noted the weighted object in the jacket pocket and the location of the deed in his hand. He was still on the call when Camille appeared in the hallway behind him. She had come through the back door, her key in the lock, her coat still on, her purse over one shoulder. She must have been close. She must have been waiting somewhere close. She looked past him through the open front door. She saw Preston on the porch. She saw the 2 men still on the ground, and the one against the railing. She saw Trey standing at the base of the steps. She saw the deed in Darius's hand. Her face moved through several expressions in quick succession. What it did not do was look surprised. It looked like a woman whose plan had just changed shape without her permission. There was calculation behind her eyes, cycling fast, trying to find the new version of the story. Her mouth opened slightly, and then closed. Darius watched her for a moment. Then he finished his statement to the dispatcher and ended the call. 3 patrol cars arrived within 11 minutes. Then, a 4th. The responding officers were efficient and thorough. They separated the men on the porch immediately, cuffed all 4, and began taking statements. One officer found the weighted object in the jacket pocket, a dense rubber-coated sap, the kind designed to produce maximum result with minimal visibility, and bagged it. Another photographed the porch, the positions of the men, the landing. The lead officer was Wallace. He was broad across the shoulders, somewhere in his late 40s, with the particular unhurried quality of a man who had been doing serious work long enough to stop performing it. He reviewed the footage on Darius's phone methodically, starting at the Range Rover's arrival, watching each camera in sequence, saying nothing until he had seen all of it twice. Then he looked up. "You got a military background?" he asked. "Navy," Darius said. "Retired." Wallace nodded slowly. His pen was poised above his notepad. "What rate?" "SEAL," Darius said. 12 years. Wallace absorbed that. He looked back at the phone. He looked at the 3 men on the ground, now seated against the front of the house with their wrists behind them, and did the math quietly and without comment. Then he wrote it in his notes. He said it without ceremony, without drama, the way men who understand that world say things. But Preston heard it. He was 6 feet away, seated on the top porch step, wrists cuffed behind his back, and he heard every word of it. The officer's question, Darius's answer, seal, 12 years. The silence that followed while Wallace did the math. Preston looked at Darius, really looked at him, the way he had not bothered to look before, because he had already decided what he was looking at. His jaw moved slightly, like he was trying to locate words that had stopped being available to him. The deed, the men, the gloves, the Range Rover idling on a quiet street in Charlotte, while a man he had spent 2 months studying turned out to be someone he had never once actually seen. He looked at the 3 men beside him on the porch. He looked at Trey, still at the base of the steps, hands in his jacket pockets, unhurried. He looked at Darius one more time and said nothing. Camille was still standing in the hallway behind the screen door. She had heard it too. Darius did not look back at her. All 4 men were placed under arrest. The deed was logged into evidence. Wallace handed Darius a card and told him the DA's office would be in contact within 48 hours. Darius thanked him. Wallace nodded, a brief, specific nod, and walked back to his cruiser. The patrol cars pulled away one by one. The street went quiet. Darius went inside. He locked the front door. He called Felicia. She answered on the first ring. It happened, he said. Deed, 3 men. Assault on my porch. All 4 are in custody. The footage is clean. All 3 cameras. The deed is in evidence. Anyone hurt? Not me. A pause. 8 o'clock still works. 8 o'clock, he said. He ended the call. He set his phone on the counter. He went to the cabinet, took down a glass, and filled it with water from the tap. He stood at the kitchen window for a moment and drank it. The neighborhood was quiet outside, the kind of quiet that had no idea what had just moved through it. He rinsed the glass, put it in the drying rack. He walked down the hall to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and took off his shoes. He set them side by side on the floor, the way he always did. He lay down. He was asleep in under 4 minutes. Felicia Okafor's office was on the 4th floor of a building on South Tryon Street, clean and quiet, and exactly the kind of place where serious things got handled without drama. No art on the walls that wasn't a diploma, no clutter on the desk, just the things that mattered, arranged in the order they mattered. Darius arrived at 7:58. She was already at her desk when the receptionist brought him back, a manila folder open in front of her and a second one stacked beside it. She had reading glasses on. She took them off when he came in. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She did not ask how he was. That was one of the things he appreciated about Felicia. She had been his attorney for 6 years, and she had never once wasted his time asking questions that weren't useful. She opened the top folder and turned it to face him. "The deed is fraudulent on its face," she said. "Improperly executed, coerced under duress, which voids it automatically. But that's the least interesting part." She tapped a printed page near the top of the stack. The notary's signature. "I ran it last night." Darius looked at the page. A name, a notary seal, a license number highlighted in yellow. "That notary is a professional contact of Preston's," Felicia said. "They have documented business history going back 4 years. That alone is enough for the DA to argue the deed was not some spontaneous idea Preston had on the way over." She paused. "But it gets more useful than that." She pulled the second folder and set it beside the first. Inside were 2 documents. Both had the same notary seal, highlighted in the same yellow marker. "Greensboro," she said, touching the first one. "Raleigh," she said, touching the second. Both connected to situations involving Preston Falk and married couples in the process of separating. Both involved property transfer documents that were later challenged. Both resolved before they reached a courtroom. She looked at Darius evenly. He has a method. He has used it before. And he has used the same notary each time, which means he has infrastructure. This is not a man who made a bad decision on a Friday night. This is a man who built a system. Darius looked at the two documents for a moment. "The DA," he said. "We'll want all of it," Felicia said. "What happened on your porch last night becomes a pattern of criminal conduct across multiple counties when it sits next to these two. That changes the charge exposure significantly." She closed the second folder. "I'll have everything to the DA's office by end of day." "And the divorce papers?" "Filed this morning," she said. 8:15. He nodded once. Felicia folded her hands on the desk. "There's something else." He waited. She opened the top folder again and turned to a page near the back. It was a photocopy of a handwritten document, 2 pages, front and back, written in a neat, organized hand that Darius recognized immediately. He had seen that handwriting on grocery lists and birthday cards and notes left on the kitchen counter for 12 years. "During discovery preparation, I flagged a consultation record," Felicia said. 7 months ago, Camille met with a divorce attorney, Gerald Marsh. He specializes in high-asset discovery, aggressive approach. What she brought with her to that first meeting is attached. Darius picked up the pages. It was a list, detailed and organized, structured the way someone structures a document they have spent real time thinking about. The house value, slightly inflated. Retirement accounts, figures that were in the right neighborhood but higher than accurate. A line item for what she called business assets, which suggested she believed there was something beyond his contracting salary she had not located yet. Notes in the margin about North Carolina's equitable distribution statute, a rough calculation at the bottom of the second page, a circled number representing what she expected to walk away with. She had done the math. She had brought the math to a lawyer. 7 months ago. Darius read both pages slowly. He set them down on the desk. He sat with it for a moment, the way he sat with everything. Not reacting, just letting it settle into its true shape. "She wasn't leaving because she fell in love," he said. His voice was quiet and level. "She was leaving, on a schedule." Felicia said nothing. There was nothing to add to it. Darius looked up from the pages. "Full discovery," he said. "Everything. Phone records, account statements, correspondence, all of it." "Already started," she said. He stood. He buttoned his jacket. He reached across the desk and shook her hand the way he always did. Firm, brief, no ceremony. "I'll be in touch," he said. He walked out through the reception area, took the elevator down, and pushed through the glass door into the morning air on South Tryon. He crossed the parking lot to his truck and got in. He sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel, not moving, looking at nothing in particular through the windshield. 7 months. She had been building a case against him for 7 months, sitting across from him at dinner, sleeping beside him, saying good morning, and be safe, and I love you, for 7 months. While a lawyer she had hired was waiting for documents she was quietly collecting. He started the truck. He had more to find. The phone records arrived on a Thursday. Felicia sent them over in a sealed envelope by courier, 4 inches thick, rubber-banded, with a yellow sticky note on the outside that said only, "Full recovery. 19 months. Call me after you read it." Darius picked the envelope up from the front porch at 6 in the evening. He set it on the kitchen counter. He made dinner, ate it at the table, washed his plate, and dried it. He put it away. He poured a glass of water. He sat down. Then he opened the envelope. The messages were organized chronologically. Earliest first. Felicia had flagged sections with colored tabs. Blue for financial coordination, red for legal strategy, yellow for everything else. The yellow tabs were the most numerous, by a wide margin. He started at the beginning. The first messages between Camille and Preston were 19 months ago, 3 months before Darius had noticed anything at all. At that point, reading the timestamps now, he and Camille had been to dinner twice that week. He remembered that week. She had seemed happy. He kept reading. Preston, it became clear, had done his homework before he ever made his move. An early message, a long one, the kind a man types slowly and deliberately, laid out what he knew about Darius with the calm, organized confidence of someone briefing a plan. Owns the house outright. No mortgage. No visible debt. Keeps his finances quiet. No social media. No flashy spending. Works federal contracting, which means solid salary, solid benefits, and probably solid retirement contributions going back years. Conservative guy. Private. The kind that stacks money because he doesn't feel the need to show it. Your settlement could be significant if this is handled right. Darius read that paragraph twice, not because it surprised him, because Preston had read him from the outside, clocked his discipline and his modesty and his quiet life, and translated all of it into a target profile. The things Darius had built deliberately, the life he had chosen on purpose, had been assessed for extraction value by a man who had never exchanged a single word with him. He turned the page. The coaching started in month 2. Preston walked Camille through which financial documents to photograph, tax returns, retirement statements, household account records. He explained North Carolina's equitable distribution statute in plain terms and told her the longer she maintained the marriage past a certain threshold, the stronger her claim. He told her exactly what to preserve and exactly what not to touch. Camille, in those messages, was not passive. She asked precise questions. She pushed back when Preston's estimates seemed too conservative. She sent him photographs of documents with notes attached, asking him to confirm she had gotten the right pages. She was organized, attentive, and thorough. She had brought that same thoroughness to 12 years of marriage. He had always admired it. He kept reading. The yellow-tabbed sections were different. They were not strategic. They were personal. In month 4, Camille wrote, "He has no idea. That's the thing about D. He's always been like this, just content. Doesn't push for anything, doesn't want anything more. I used to think it was steady. Now, I just think it's small. In month 9, he asked me tonight if I was okay. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered I'm the one who has to live this life, and I got over it pretty fast. In month 14, he trusts me completely. That's actually what makes this so easy. He built everything on the assumption that I wouldn't do this. His whole plan depends on me being who he thinks I am." And then, near the end, in a message Camille sent to Preston 2 weeks before Roy took the photograph at the restaurant, "He won't see it coming. Men like him never do. They're too busy being good." Darius set that page down on the table. He sat for a long time in the kitchen, in the quiet, with the overhead light on and the rest of the house dark around him. He thought about being 29 years old, freshly back from a deployment that ended with 2 of his teammates in boxes and him on a plane home with no good way to explain to anyone what that felt like. He had been hollowed out in a way that didn't show on the outside and didn't have a name he could use in polite conversation. He had met Camille at a birthday party for a mutual friend, and she had laughed at something he said and looked at him like he was worth looking at, and that had been enough. That had been more than enough. He had built the whole thing with her in mind. Every payment, every decision, every deliberate, unglamorous choice to live below his means and stack the margin and make something solid that no one could take. Too busy being good. He got up from the table. He rinsed his mug in the sink, dried it, put it back in the cabinet. He stood at the window for a moment looking out at the backyard. Then he picked up his phone and opened his notes. He added 1 line to the list that was already there. The right people need to hear what was said in the dark. He set the phone down. He went to bed. In the morning he called Roy first. He didn't read the messages aloud. He described what they contained, plainly, without theater, and told Roy the shape of what had been going on for 19 months. Roy listened without interrupting. When Darius finished, there was a brief silence. "She did all that," Roy said. "Not a question." "All of it," Darius said. "Documented." Another silence. "What do you need from me?" Roy asked. "Nothing dramatic," Darius said. "Just be honest. When people in her circle ask how I'm doing, and they will, tell them the truth. Not more than the truth. Just the truth." "I can do that," Roy said. "I know you can," Darius said. He hung up and sat with the second call for a moment before making it. Then he dialed. Bernadette answered on the second ring, the way she always did. "Darius," she said, warm and immediate, the way she had always said his name. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I was wondering if I could come see you." A brief pause. "Come today," she said. "I'll put on coffee." Bernadette's house was in the Noda neighborhood, a brick rancher she had lived in for 30 years, with a garden out front that she maintained with the same quiet discipline she brought to everything else. The hydrangeas along the front walk were just beginning to come back. She met him at the door before he knocked. She had coffee ready, and she poured it without asking, and she sat across from him at her kitchen table, and folded her hands, and looked at him with the steady, clear-eyed attention of a woman who had already understood, long before this moment, that something was wrong. He told her everything. He told her about Roy's photograph. He told her about Friday night, the Range Rover pulling up, the men climbing out, the leather gloves, the deed, the 15 seconds on the porch, and Officer Wallace asking his question in front of Preston in handcuffs. He told her about the hidden attorney consultation, the handwritten settlement list. He opened the folder he had brought and showed her selected pages from the recovered messages. Not all of them, but enough. The coaching. The financial strategy. The contempt. Bernadette read without speaking. She read slowly, the way someone reads something they want to make sure they are understanding correctly, because the alternative is that they are understanding it just fine, and it is exactly as bad as it appears. She set the pages down. She sat with her hands folded and looked at the table for a long moment. The kitchen was very quiet. Then she looked up at him. "I told her," Bernadette said. Her voice was steady and low. "I told her you were a good man, and she would not find another one." Darius nodded once. He did not ask her to do anything. That was not why he had come. He had come because Bernadette had stood at his wedding and called him son without being asked to, and meant it, and she deserved to hear the truth from him directly, not as rumor, not as courthouse paperwork, but from his mouth, sitting across her kitchen table, the same way he had always talked to her. He finished his coffee. He thanked her for the time. He stood, and she stood with him, and at the door she took his hand in both of hers and held it for a moment without saying anything. He drove home. Camille's attorney was a woman named Sandra Veitch, sharp, expensive, and not in the habit of softening bad news. She delivered it across a mahogany desk on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the divorce papers landed. "The house equity is subject to equitable distribution," Sandra said. "North Carolina is not a community property state, but the court will look at the full picture. Length of the marriage, contributions, current financial standing. You'll receive a portion, not half, necessarily. A portion." Camille shifted in her chair. "How much is a portion?" Sandra set down her pen. "Less than you estimated when you came to see me the first time." Camille had brought that handwritten list to her first consultation like a shopping receipt. Hotels she had already priced out. A figure she had built her next 2 years around. Sandra had reviewed Darius's actual financial picture through the discovery filings and found a man who lived cleanly and saved deliberately and carried no hidden accounts, no secondary properties, no overlooked income streams worth excavating. What there was real, but it was not what Camille had counted on. And the retirement accounts? "Split per statute," Sandra said, "which is what they always do." Camille sat with that for a moment. The number in her head, the one she had been carrying for 7 months, the one she had written in careful handwriting in Sandra's office a lifetime ago, quietly revised itself downward in a way she was not ready for. She drove home in silence. Preston was holding his version together with both hands. He told his professional contacts the same story in rotation. The charges were exaggerated. The deed was a legal instrument misrepresented by a vindictive husband. The whole thing was being dramatized because Darius Wynne couldn't accept that his marriage was over. He said it with the ease of a man who had talked his way out of things before. He said it at lunch meetings and in parking lot conversations, and over the phone to the broker in his network who controlled the listings he needed to stay relevant. Some of them nodded. Some of them seemed to believe him, at least initially. But the DA's filings were a matter of public record, and public records had a way of circulating in professional circles where reputation was the only currency that actually mattered. By the fourth week, 2 colleagues had stopped returning his calls. A third told him plainly that he needed to let things settle before they talked business. The brokerage where he held his license issued a formal notice of inquiry. Nothing decided yet. But the notice existed now, and notices had a way of becoming things. He told Camille the situation was manageable. He believed it less each time he said it. The rooms were different. That was the only way Camille could describe it to herself, in the quiet of her apartment at night. The rooms were different when she walked into them. Her Aunt Gloria had called last Sunday, a call that lasted 4 minutes instead of the usual 20, with a particular careful quality to Gloria's voice, like a woman choosing each word the way you choose footing on uncertain ground. Her cousin Lena had seen her at the grocery store and smiled and kept moving. A woman from her church small group had texted to say she was praying for her, which was the kind of message that said more in what it didn't say than in what it did. Camille knew the shape of this. She had watched it happen to other women in other situations, from a comfortable distance, with the private confidence that she would never be the one it happened to. Her mother was not gossiping. That was the thing that made it so hard to fight. Bernadette did not gossip. Everyone who knew her understood that, which meant that when Bernadette said something, she was not spreading a story. She was reporting a fact, and the people who received those facts trusted them completely, because Bernadette had spent 63 years earning exactly that kind of trust. Camille could not call her mother a liar. She could not call anyone Bernadette had spoken to and offer a competing version. The ground had already been shaped before she arrived in any room, and the shape of it was not in her favor. Preston found the airfield by accident. A contact mentioned the helicopter in passing, the way people mention details they assume everyone already knows. Preston did not already know. He drove out on a Thursday afternoon, parked on the gravel shoulder outside the fence line, and waited. He saw them 40 minutes later. Darius and another man, broad-shouldered, unhurried, moving around the small Robinson R22 with the easy familiarity of men who had done this 1,000 times, checking instruments, walking the tail. No conversation he could hear from where he sat, just 2 men running through their checklist with the quiet competence of people who did not need to perform it for anyone. Then they climbed in and lifted off, clean and simple. The helicopter banked northeast and shrank to a point and disappeared into the open sky. Preston sat in his leased Range Rover, 3 payments behind, and watched the empty sky for a moment after they were gone. The fear that had started on the porch, when Officer Wallace asked his question and Darius answered it in that flat, certain voice, had not left. It had only settled deeper, gotten quieter, become the kind of thing that sat under everything else and did not announce itself, but was always there. He drove back to the city without calling Camille. Darius called Bernadette on a Friday evening and asked her to gather the immediate family at her home within the week. Just the core people, he said. Your sisters, Marcus, whoever Camille would want in that room. Bernadette was quiet for a moment. And Camille herself? Yes, Darius said. Another pause. What should I tell them it's about? Tell them I have things to say that the family deserves to hear directly, before everything becomes courthouse paperwork. All right, baby, Bernadette said. I'll make it happen. Bernadette's house smelled like coffee and sweet potato pie. She had cooked. That was the first thing Darius noticed when he came through the front door. A full spread on the dining room sideboard, coffee, juice, a pie cooling on a trivet. Like company was coming. Like this was a visit. He supposed it was. The family was already seated when he arrived. Bernadette at the head of the room in her good chair, back straight, hands folded in her lap. Her sisters, Gloria and May, side by side on the sofa, both in church clothes at 6 in the evening, which told him something about how seriously Bernadette had framed the occasion. Camille's brother Marcus sat apart from the women near the window, elbows on his knees, watching the door. Camille came in 5 minutes after Darius. She stopped when she saw the room, just for a beat, a fraction of a second where her expression recalibrated. She had been expecting something else. He could see it. Maybe a conversation between two people. Not 7. Maybe a chance to manage the narrative before it settled. She sat down in the open chair near the door. No one offered her the pie. Darius did not stand. He sat with his folder on his knee and spoke in the same voice he used for everything. Level, unhurried, carrying no weight it didn't need to carry. He started with the photograph. He passed Roy's phone image to Gloria first and let it travel around the room. He said where it was taken, who took it, and when. He did not describe his reaction to seeing it. The photograph described itself. Then he described the Friday night. He kept it factual. Preston's Range Rover in the driveway. 4 men on the path. The leather gloves pulled on while walking up. The quitclaim deed produced from inside a Blazer, a document prepared to transfer their home to Camille before any divorce proceeding could complicate the timeline. He described how Preston held it out. He described what he said. "You're going to sign this." He told them how the night ended. All 4 men arrested. The deed logged into evidence. He mentioned Officer Wallace and the question Wallace asked him on the porch while Preston stood 6 feet away and handcuffed. What rate? Seal. 12 years. He said it the way Wallace had written it down. Without drama, without emphasis, as a statement of plain fact. He watched the room absorb it. Marcus looked up from his hands. Gloria's eyes moved to Camille, and then back to Darius. Camille was very still. Then he opened the folder. "I want to read you a few things," he said. "I'm not going to explain them. I just want you to hear them." He read from the recovered messages in the same steady voice. Preston's instructions to Camille, in his own words: photograph the retirement account statements, keep the household receipts. We need documentation of his income pattern for the last 3 years. He read Camille's responses: cooperative, organized, sometimes enthusiastic. Then he read the other ones, the ones where she described Darius. He read them without flinching. He's comfortable. That's all he's ever going to be. Comfortable and quiet and completely satisfied with a life I outgrew 5 years ago. He read the line she had written to Preston in month 11 of their 19 months. He's never going to see it coming. Men like him never do. That's the whole point. He closed the folder. The room was quiet, in a way that had texture to it. The kind of quiet that is not empty, but full of things no one is yet ready to say out loud. Camille spoke first. Her voice was controlled and practiced, and she leaned slightly forward the way she did when she was building toward something. She said the messages lacked context. She said the situation had been more complicated than it looked on paper, that she had been unhappy for years and had no language for it, that Preston had been a mistake she was managing, that the deed was something she had never authorized or anticipated. She said it well. She had clearly rehearsed it. The room did not move toward her. Gloria looked at May. The look lasted 2 seconds. It was the kind of look that exists between sisters who have already had this conversation and arrived somewhere on the other side of it. May looked down at her hands. Marcus stood up. He did not look at Camille. He picked up his jacket from the arm of the chair. and he walked to the front door, and he left. The door closed behind him. Not slammed, just closed, which was somehow worse. Camille watched her brother go. Something in her face broke open then. Not the practiced emotion of the prepared narrative, but something real and smaller and worse. Her hands came up to cover her mouth. Her shoulders dropped. The tears came quietly, without performance, which was possibly the most honest thing Darius had seen from her in a very long time. He waited. He let her cry until she was done. No one else spoke. Bernadette sat in her chair with her hands still folded, watching her daughter with an expression Darius had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not cold, but a grief so settled and specific it looked like it had been there for months, like she had already arrived at this moment before tonight and simply waited for the room to catch up. When Camille's breathing steadied, Darius spoke. "I didn't come here to hurt you," he said. Quiet, direct. "I came here because these people love you, and they deserve to know who they've been loving." He stood. He set the folder on the side table, leaving it there where it could stay. He crossed to Bernadette. She looked up at him and reached out and took his hand in both of hers. She held it for a moment, her grip firm and warm, the grip of a woman who had made a decision about what this moment required and was not going to waver from it. Then she let go. He said goodnight to Gloria and May. He walked to the front door and stepped out into the evening air, the neighborhood going blue and quiet around him, the first stars showing low in the east. He got in his truck and drove to the airfield. Trey was already there. He was doing pre-flight on the R-22, moving around the tail with a flashlight, unhurried. He did not look up when Darius parked, did not ask how it went. Darius climbed out of the truck and walked over and picked up the other side of the checklist without a word. They worked through it together in the gathering dark. By the time they climbed in, the sun was a thin orange line behind the tree line to the west. Trey brought the engine up and the rotors turned, and the ground fell away beneath them. The airfield, the road, the city spreading in every direction, all of it shrinking, all of it letting go. They flew northeast. No destination, just up and out and free. 14 months later, the deck was exactly as he had planned it. Wide enough for 2 chairs and a small table, facing east. Built over 3 weekends in October, when the air turned cool and the leaves came down in the backyard one at a time, slow and unhurried, like they weren't in any particular rush to go anywhere. He had laid every board himself, cut every angle, set every screw flush and level. Trey had come by the second weekend and worked alongside him without being asked, and they had not talked much, just built, and when it was done it was solid, in the way that things built carefully, and without shortcuts, tend to be solid. Darius sat in one of the 2 chairs now and watched the morning come in. The sky went from gray to the color of copper, to something pale and clean that didn't have a name he knew. The neighborhood was still asleep. A dog somewhere 2 houses down shifted and resettled. A car passed on the street out front, early commuter, headlights still on. Then quiet again. He wrapped both hands around his mug and let the warmth move through his palms. Preston Falk had been at a minimum security facility 2 hours outside Charlotte for almost 11 months now. 32 months total. That was the plea. His real estate license was gone. Suspended at indictment, revoked at conviction, which in practical terms meant it did not exist and would not exist again in any form that mattered. The Range Rover had gone back to the dealership while he was still in county waiting on sentencing. 3 payments behind. The dealership did not wait. The $85,000 civil judgment sat attached to his name like a second shadow. It was accruing interest. It would be there when he got out, attached to every paycheck and every account he ever opened, patient and unbothered. the way consequences tend to be when they are written down in a courthouse and signed by a judge. His 3 associates were serving their time in separate facilities. The man with the leather gloves, the one who had moved first on the porch, the one who had decided in that particular fraction of a second that Darius was someone worth moving against, had received the longest term. He had 14 months remaining. Darius did not think about him often. The notary had cooperated early and pled separately. His cooperation had tightened the case considerably. The DA had not needed to be persuaded. Camille had not been charged. The DA reviewed her involvement thoroughly. The text messages were clear about what she knew and when she knew it, but proving beyond a reasonable doubt that she had directed or anticipated the physical assault was a different bar than the one the messages cleared. Her attorney had argued she understood the deed as a negotiating instrument. The DA had looked at the evidence and made a judgment call. But she had been deposed extensively in the civil proceeding. Her testimony, under oath, about what she knew and when she knew it and what her role had been across 19 months, was now a permanent public record attached to her name. Searchable. Permanent. The kind of thing that existed in databases and did not go away because time passed or because she wished it would. Judge Harriet Odom had presided over the divorce. 30 years on the bench. She had read the full discovery record herself. Felicia had made sure of that. And she had factored Camille's systematic withdrawal of marital funds as dissipation of marital assets without requiring extensive argument to do so. The settlement was real. Camille received her legal share of the house equity, the accounts divided cleanly per state law. But the dissipation ruling reduced her final number in ways that made it a fraction of the figure she had once written in careful handwriting on a list in another attorney's office. The plan had been built on an assumption. The assumption had been wrong. She lived in an apartment now, in a part of Charlotte that was not where she had imagined herself at 39. She worked. She was building something slowly, without a blueprint and without a partner. In the particular silence that follows a life you constructed carefully and watched come apart because the foundation was not what you believed it was. Bernadette called her every week. Those conversations were honest and hard, and neither of them pretended otherwise. The love in them was real. A mother did not stop. But it was the harder, more honest kind of love now. The kind that did not smooth things over or offer exits that had not been earned. Camille showed up to those calls. That was something. She did not contact Darius. She understood that there was nothing she could say that would be adequate, and that understanding was its own weight she carried from one day to the next. Roy and Marion came to dinner twice a month. Roy always brought something, last time a bottle of decent bourbon and a story about a former colleague that lasted 40 minutes and was worth every one of them. Marion laughed too loud at her own husband's jokes, which had always been one of Darius's favorite things about her. Bernadette called on his birthday. She had called every year since he married Camille, and she did not stop after the marriage ended, which told him everything about what kind of woman she was. He always answered. They talked about small things, her garden, her church, something funny that happened at the market, and at the end of every call she said, "Take care of yourself, son." And he told her he would, and he meant it. He flew with Trey most weekends. The weather cooperated. Sometimes they had a destination. Most times they didn't. They would lift off, and the city would fall away beneath them, and the morning would open in every direction, and Darius would think about nothing in particular, just the air and the light, and the altitude, and the easy silence between two men who had survived things together that no one outside that world needed to know about. He set down his mug now and stood. The morning light was coming in full across the deck, spreading warm and even across the boards he had laid himself, board by board, weekend by weekend, in the cool October air of a life that was still his, still whole, still exactly what he had built it to be. He was not angry. He had processed what happened, filed it where it belonged, and moved on from it the same way he had moved on from harder things. He was not bitter. Bitterness required tending, and he had better things to do with his time. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. He was standing on a deck he had built with his own hands, in a house that was paid off and clean, and his looking east at a morning that belonged entirely to him. He picked up his mug and went inside to start his day. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.